Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think that we have a couple of things that we're going to be talking about during the course of the afternoon. I just, as a starting point, I wanted to thank all of our delegates and participants that have joined us today. We've got more than 200 delegates that have enrolled, which I'm very excited about. One of the things that I wanted for us to do is just to kick off by having a quick talk about where we stand in terms of the current lockdown regulation that exists in South Africa. So we're in week 4 of our lockdown, and the latest that we've heard is that the following restrictions will remain in place after the national lockdown: a prohibition on gatherings of more than 10 people outside of a workplace environment. The government has also said that they will consider eliminating that prohibition based on 3 factors: the risk of transmission, the expected impact on the sector of continued lockdown, and the value of the sector to the economy. And I think during the course of the next hour, I want to discuss all 3 of those issues. They've also said that they will only consider removing the lockdown or the prohibition on meetings once we can provide, as an industry sector, a COVID-19 prevention and mitigation plan, and we can demonstrate that we have monitoring systems in place to ensure compliance with the safety protocols, and that we can protect the identity or identify potential infections amongst employees. So, I think that these are all fairly sensible things, and I suspect that this is very similar to the scenario that exists in other countries. So I'm going to shut down my screen and bring on the participants in today's discussion, and perhaps Jim, as a starting point, you can introduce yourself, but perhaps then go on to talk about how these prohibitions and the situation we find ourselves in compares with the situation that exists in the US or elsewhere around the world.
Thanks, Kevin, and hello, everyone. My name is Jim Digby, and I am co-founder of the Event Safety Alliance, global advocacy group for safety in live events. I think what you've just demonstrated, Kevin, is that South Africa leads the way in front of the United States. Such clear guidance, in my opinion, does not yet exist nationwide. There are, if anyone's watching the news, you may know, a variety of approaches going on across the US, not the least of which is ignoring the virus altogether and going back to work as usual. Our opinion, and we are not medical doctors, but our opinion is that's dangerous. The Event Safety Alliance and its Vice President, Steve Edelman, have formed a working group to address how the live events sector may come back to work. We don't see this as something that's happening in the near term. In fact, we believe that we were the first to go down and will be the last to come up, the live event sector. What we do causes mass gatherings. What we do survives and needs people in a closed quarters to be together. And therefore, with respect to this virus, I don't think we come back anytime soon. The benchmarks for us, of course, will be some sort of vaccine or treatment that's proven, and that takes some time to do. In the interim, however, we are proactively measuring the things that can be done by small venues to bring themselves back to life, because it's our belief that if the small venues can do that successfully and do that in a unified approach, meaning we're all practicing the same sort of standards for risk mitigation, then we will have a likelier, faster trajectory towards larger venues. However, the opposite is true of that. Obviously, if a small venue goes live too soon without the correct protocols and does it wrong and causes a bunch of people to be infected, we will probably see a sustained and prolonged shutdown of the live event sector. That's what the impetus is for create some sort of unified suggested guidances for us as an industry worldwide to ensure that we don't make those mistakes straight out of the box.
And I can't see Tim's picture on my screen, but Tim, can you just give some insight? What's it like from a UK perspective, and how does the position that we're in compare with the situation that industry in the UK is facing?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Kevin, and greetings to everyone on the call. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I think I'd echo that we're probably in a position more similar to the US than you are in South Africa at the moment. We don't have yet official guidance on the requirements for the event industry, or indeed any other industry yet, to restart business as close to normal as we would like to have. Instead, we're still really in the discourse of kind of where are we on the infection curve, where are we in the effectiveness of the mitigation measures of social distancing and close down that the country's undergone. The most recent we've heard from our chief medical officer is the likelihood that some social distancing measures may be in place until the end of the year and possibly even beyond. And just echoing the words that Jim just gave, that our sector, almost by definition, brings people together into gatherings, whether or not they're able to socially distance or not is a moot point. And we're likely, certainly in the larger end of the industry, for things like festivals, arena shows and that kind of thing, we're likely to be the very tail end of what gets reactivated. But having said that, I think on the positive side, I really applaud your government and what they've issued, and looking at what's coming out of places like Dubai. We have an office in Hong Kong, what we're seeing from Hong Kong and China, where guidance is coming from governments on that process of restart. And what is clear is that some kind of prevention and mitigation plan is going to be required, whether legally or simply because it's sensible. And we in the industry need to understand how that may affect our particular business, and those of us that are in the business of putting events together, what kind of things we should be demanding of our vendors, what kind of requirements we may impose on the public, what kind of limitations there may be on the regular liberties that people have enjoyed. So, for example, in China, the plan there includes facial recognition and being able to identify who's at a show, so that if there is a subsequent outbreak, they can, they can trace back and find who was there. Whether or not in other territories and other jurisdictions that kind of imposition on personal liberty is permissible or even conceivable, who knows? But that's where we're at. So I think we're kind of behind you guys in terms of the legislative and guidance curve. I'm not sure where we are in terms of the virus propagation curve.
So earlier today, I was having a conversation with Sharif, and he slapped me loudly and said, I was being a scaremonger. Mike, would you mind just jumping in on this part of the conversation? I've had a number of people say to me that actually what we're doing is we're worrying about something that we should not be worrying about. Send everybody back to work. Let's take on life as normal. What's the situation that we should be looking at? Am I a scaremonger?
No, I think we need to be realistic by what's happening. One of the things that came out of a town hall meeting that some of us have heard, which Jim and Tim were part of, was that at the moment, the analogy is our house is on fire at the moment. So we've got to get it under control, and we've got to get those specialists to get it under control. Ultimately, for us to go back into operation is going to be a 3 to 6 month kind of activation, if we're lucky, from a point of view of even advertising or going to market. But I don't see events happening before, logically, in South Africa before September. But as everybody's saying worldwide, that's closer probably to December and January next year. So it's almost like a reboot of 2020, to be honest.
And Phil, is that the kind of timescale you're looking at?
Yeah, so some of our international clients, as per Mike, all the positive planning for September, October is all dependent on where does this go. The uncertainty is everywhere. So I think I'm with Mike. September, October looks positive. I don't know if it's doable. We'll have to see, tonight, and what the government's, plans for us going forward.
Okay. Now, Sharif, if you don't mind me jumping over to you, this is a situation that has hit the freelance industry, but also, you know, from a TPSA perspective, it's hit all of our members very hard. What are the greatest issues that we're looking at from the perspective of event safety, and what kind of things should we be focusing on?
Hi, thanks, Kevin and team. It's a learning curve. Everything that we're doing day by day, minute by minute, we're learning something new. I definitely applaud our president in what he is doing in the initiatives he are taking, and thank you, Jim and Tim, for recognizing that. And having said that, our industry is on tender hooks and on tender nerves of when can we go back to work. Yes, there's a reality that it cannot be rushed. We have to do it in its own time. We have to see which way Corona goes. But as the TPSA, we would now look to the Event Safety Council. We would look to people like Mike and to Phil to take the initiative, like our president has done, to take the initiative and putting a battle plan into place with regards to if it happens September, if it happens in December. We need to find ways of which way we're going to work moving forward, rather than saying, okay, let's see what happens. The house is on fire, yes, but this is how we're going to put it out. And this is how we're going to make sure it never happens again, or plans in place. We need to be able to speak to our constituents, be able to speak to the public at large, that we have got plans. We are positive in our way of thinking. And once we've overcome this, globally, this is the way we're moving forward. And the TPSA looks to people like Mike and Phil in leading us as being the astute leaders in our event safety industry.
Sharif, Kevin, can I jump in on that with Sharif? Yeah, so there's obviously two critical paths, in my opinion, there's two critical paths right now, and that is, as Sharif has correctly stated, let's get prepared. Regardless of whether it's September or January or whenever it is, let's be prepared and demonstrate that we, as a global community of live event producers, have come together and established what our new norm will be. I don't think this goes away once we're post-COVID. You know, perhaps this is how we should be operating moving forward anyhow, to some extent. So the protocols that we build, we should be building together and implementing together as a global community, in my opinion. Secondly, the other part of this that's a real concern, and the immediate concern, is the people who conduct business in the live event space, the humans, the human companies, and the fact that many of them are suffering for lack of knowledge of what happens next. Where's their next meal coming from? There's a food crisis going on in the US. There are stagehands sleeping in cars in the US, and there's a huge mental resilience issue going on. And I'm sure that's global. So this is another pressing need for right now.
I was about to ask a question of Renthia, just in terms of so let's explain. You're the event safety officer within MGG.
Yes.
How has this impacted you? The same way that everybody else has been impacted, of course. And what kind of steps are you putting in place for events going forward?
From our side, we already written our policies. So when everybody starts going back, they know they have to wear masks, the hand sanitizing, all of that distancing. We already discussed all of that regulations to, and yeah, it's 2-3 pages long of everything we need to do to prevent that we don't get all sick at once. As well, if events starting, we already have a plan. So how we would treat the clients, make sure that distances are kept. We don't introduce all our guys to the clients or to any person. The age must maybe become bigger. There's a lot of things we are considering to make it easier on our guys as well, and on the clients and the artists, so we don't affect everybody. So everything, yeah, we've already written down. We speak to each other about it, and we try to make everything work when we're back.
So one of the things I just to the live audience, please remember that you can send in questions. We'll put them to the panel as they arrive. I have a question for Tim that's just come in. The question is, can you? Oh, here we go. Just as I was about to start reading it, the screen disappeared. It was something about China. can you repeat what was happening in China insofar as, here we are, can you repeat what you said is happening in China regarding the facial recognition technology and how that helps things with like COVID scares? This must have been in another meeting. I didn't hear you say anything at all about China, but obviously somebody's asked the question. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, for sure. I did actually mention China. So the reasoning in the Chinese plan, and at the moment nothing has happened yet, but they are saying that if you are seeking to reopen a public entertainment venue, these are the criteria that will be required. So exactly as per the document that you guys have circulated, and thanks again for that, in terms of having a COVID prevention and mitigation plan, one of the measures the Chinese wish to implement was thermal imaging to check whether someone has a temperature. Are they suffering from COVID symptoms in the first instance? Do we let them in or not? Allied with that is the requirement to identify individuals who are coming. The plan being to use facial recognition technology so that you can tell who was at that show. Now, I make no kind of observation about whether the Chinese are right or not to photograph their citizens. That's a totally different kind of political freedom bit of discourse. But in this instance, the rationale is that they can identify who was at the show. And if an outbreak subsequently flares up, they're able to then contact those individuals and say, you were 5 places in the queue behind the person who presented with symptoms a week later. We're advising you to self-isolate, so that they can do the tracking and lockdown on the, on any potential flare-up resulting from people assembling in a mass gathering. And Kevin, I just wanted to could I make another very quick point that back to the question you put to at the beginning, are you a scaremonger? Is this all kind of crazy nonsense? And actually, this is no different to the common flu, and we've got some kind of global knee-jerk reaction that is overwhelming and more destructive than the virus. I do not know the answer to that question. I'm not a virologist. I don't understand really how it may work. And I don't think, that we need to move to a different discourse. Whether it's crazy to close down the venues or not, that's not what we should discuss. I think what we should concentrate on is how do we make sensible, practical, proportionate measures to be sure that when we do go back to work, we can be right there on day one saying, yes, we've got a prevention plan. Yes, we've got a welfare monitoring plan. Yes, we've got a way that we can comply with all the requirements that local or national government may place upon us so that we are doing the right thing as far as possible. Simply saying this is stupid and why don't we open up because we're all going to die of something in the end anyway, it may as well be this, let's crack on and let the business go. I don't think that's, I don't personally believe that, and I don't want to advocate for that. And I think we as a trade association and others should avoid that.
So I see Zona just arrived, and Phil had a question. So Phil, do you want to pick up on that?
So yeah, I just want to, I think one of the big responsibilities for us, if we can be part of that influencer with the government, obviously what is the responsibility of the organizers now? What fencing, what cameras, what screening, all that type of stuff, because immediately this will question the viability of an event or planning of such an event. So once again, we want to go and talk to the Department of Health and whatever, see what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and say to our organizers, gentlemen, ladies, if you want to do an open air, this is the expectation, this is all the stuff, etc., etc., etc. So, Kev, 100%, I hear what Tim is saying, fantastic input. We need to know, and the clients are looking at us to say, okay, what does that constitute? What does that mean?
I think one of the things that we're trying to do from a SACIA perspective is engage with a broad range of other stakeholders. So obviously we're working with the Event Safety Alliance and the PSA in Britain. I see Andy just arrived, so hello, Andy. We're also working very closely with EXA, the Events and Exhibition Association, SACIA, the South African Association for the Conference Industry, AXO, the African Association for the Exhibition Organisers, and other stakeholders, so that whatever we do, we're not doing it in isolation. We're doing it in collaboration with others. Sharif, I want to ask another question of you, if you don't mind. Remember, you and I were wandering around the dome shortly before the lockdown. I think it was just before the MNet Awards evening. And we were having a conversation about practical steps that event companies could put in place to try and restrict the spread of the virus. So perhaps understanding that none of us are necessarily medical professionals, from a practical point of view, what kind of things could people be doing?
Yeah, riding on the back of what Tim and Phil said, and they're both absolutely right. We have now entered a new world order, and it is a global new world order. End of story. So we have the perfect opportunity here to create a clean slate and let the Event Safety Alliance globally speak with one voice and a paper be written on how this goes forward. Like you said, we walked around the dome, and the dome may put in their rules and regulations, and then another venue will do their own, and the another will do their own. We have the opportunity of recognizing that there is a problem moving forward, and we need to find a solution in a positive way. If facial recognition is the way to go, then so be it. Terms and conditions apply when you're buying your ticket from your ticket person or from your event organizer. It speaks to how we speak to municipalities and government and JOC, joint operations committees, so that this is the norm moving forward in making sure we can look after health and safety primarily at an event. It comes down to responsibility and maturity. And if we can all put our heads together and create a paper that speaks globally on the same rhetoric and the same rules and regulations, it will assist in items of doing an event, an MNet event just before. Have they put in place? Have they got sanitizer? Have they got screening? Have they got, if we put it all in place as part of the checklist for risk grading, then we've solved half of the problem, if not more of it.
I'm going to come to you, but I want to just ask Andy a question, if you don't mind. So, Andy, I know you joined the conversation a little late. Can you give us some insight?
I've been here.
Yeah, we didn't see you. Can you give us some insight into the kind of things that are happening in the UK, and how does the experience that you have in Britain compare with the kind of circumstances that we're experiencing in South Africa?
Well, I'm currently located about 25 kilometers east of Tim, so it's pretty much the same for answer you'll have had from Tim. That it's completely finished. I mean, we're obviously in a different season. We're just coming into outdoor event and festival season, which was finished before it started, basically for 2020. So that's a whole. The live music industry has probably lost £500 million, which is half of its value, in contribution to the economy this year. So it's not good. It's really not good. In terms of future prospects, I think that's where the focus is shifting now, because I've just seen the document you shared with relief packages. The same's happening in every country around the world, where businesses and individuals are getting relief packages because they can't work, and generically across the UK we're being helped. So the focus across the creative industry, if you like, for us is how do we return, and obviously the focus has to be how do we return safely. And what we've kind of started working on is actually, everybody in the UK is talking about mass gatherings being banned. You see, mass gatherings are banned until the end of August or October in Germany or Belgium or wherever. We're trying to redefine ourselves as organized gatherings, because if you have an organized gathering, say, if you know who's coming, because you've given somebody, or you've exchanged a ticket, or you charged for a ticket, then you have some method of communication with the audience at your organized gathering, and you can pre-organize measures for that gathering. So if you are putting systems into place that we're all recommending, you can put those systems into place earlier by communicating the systems to your audience, whether that's a conference or an exhibition, maybe a small gig, maybe a larger gig. But if we start actually letting the world know that we actually do organize these things, and they don't just fall together and everybody just turn up on the night, then we may have half a chance of getting our sector recognized as somebody who can, as a sector that can manage its own comeback safely.
Yes, absolutely. Phil, you had something, and then after that, I want to just ask a question of Zona. So please prepare yourself, Zona. What I want to know is what the larger production companies can do to prepare themselves for a comeback at some later point in time. But before you get to that question, Phil, if you can.
So I just want to jump in with you and Sharif's little walk at the Dome. That was that last Saturday before lockdown, the DSTV Mzansi Awards. Because all the guests in essence were invited and the people that were attending had to qualify through an app, they were all traceable. But just on that evening, to buy every attendee a hand sanitizer was 350K. That came onto the organizer. I go to my point before, you know, for the city job to say we're comfortable letting go ahead. The question is, if we go ahead, and I hear what Andy's saying, what will it cost and what influence will be on the event organizer? And this organized gathering sounds very attractive.
I have to be honest, Sharif and I were walking around and we were, you know, scratching our heads, and it was before the lockdown, so we were trying to figure out, you know, actually, if I go back 2 months, somebody had said to me, "Oh, Corona's coming and it's going to kill the industry." I'd have, no, what have you been smoking? So this has been a huge shock for all of us, and what we're trying to do is to learn as we go. Zona, perhaps you can give us some insight. How did it impact Gearhouse? You know, you're probably the largest technical production company in the country. So how did it impact Gearhouse? And what kind of things are you putting in place so that when industry is able to resurrect itself, you're ready to provide the kind of service that's required?
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, same as MGG, we've put in policies and procedures. We've done training with our guys on how to take care of themselves, how to take care of the people around them, keep social distancing, keep hand sanitizing, washing hands, try not to touch your face and everything. But yeah, it impacted quite a bit on, or not a bit, quite a lot on Gearhouse. From the Wednesday before Cyril Ramaphosa did his first announcement, we've lost 150 million rands worth of business in less than a week. And thereafter, everything else was cancelled. So it hurt us very big and very badly. And all we can do now is try and manage it. And I do agree with what Andy said. If we can start doing this as organized events and not mass gatherings, it will help us a lot. And then coming back to what Phil said, I think going forward, it is everybody's personal responsibility to take care of themselves. So if we start doing mass gatherings or organized gatherings, yes, the venue and the event organizer have a responsibility, but I also think that every person coming to an exhibition, coming to a show, whatever, must also do their own part in protecting themselves and the people around them. So I don't think it must just all fall back onto the event organizer. I think that must be part of the terms and conditions on buying a ticket, that you will come with your mask and hand sanitizer and everything yourself. Yes, the venues need to put in additional things as well, but we can't take all this responsibility just on us as an industry. In the end of the day, this is affecting globally every person, and going anywhere. I mean, when we go shopping now for our essentials, you take your mask, you take your gloves, whatever. You make sure that you protect yourself and your people in your household or that's around you. So I think that is the best way going forward for our industry as well, is if somebody wants to come and attend a show, they need to also come in prepared and not just expect us as the event organizers and the technical production companies to do our part. I don't know. That's just a thing that I think we have changed globally. You can't go out anywhere you want to go without personal protective equipment. So that is the way forward for everybody in the future, or at least for the next 18 months. So there is a vaccine.
Each person takes responsibility for their own immediate space and their own immediate behavior.
Yeah.
I have another question, this one posted by David Leverington. I'm going to throw this one in Sharif's direction. David writes here, can we not start developing safety guidelines and physical solutions that industry can implement, which would allow industry to come back online, even on a small scale? These must come from the top and passed on to government. We are the industry and we should dictate as to when, how we get back online. I want to rephrase this or bring it down. What's the relationship between industry and government? Who does what, and how do we work together to solve this particular problem? And actually, I want Andy to weigh in on this, because I know Andy's been very involved in working with the UK government on issues relating to the events industry as well. But Sharif, if you could kick off there.
Yeah, I think we have to find a way forward sooner rather than later, so that everybody knows when we do get back to it what we're going to be doing, especially from the artists and the technical and the event managers and production. Because if we're doing it right, our patrons and our audience will feel far more at ease and comfortable coming to a organized event. With regards to engagement with government, we are, I think, almost every other day speaking to the Department of Arts and Culture, which is the sector we fall into, in this regard, to see how we can find a way forward. But we do need to learn from Andy and from Jim and from Franco of what they're doing, so that we can create a paper where Mike and Phil and the Event Safety Alliance, together with SACIA and TPS, can present to government and say, this is what we want to do going forward. We can't just expect government to do everything for us. We have to assist them as well. So this is something that we need to start putting together now, so that before September hits, everybody's on the same page. And we're taking the lead as the Event Safety Alliance under SACIA and with the TPSA, because the PSA is doing it, the VLPT is doing it, ESTA is doing it. And if we're all speaking the same language, the government has got no choice but to listen, and vice versa. If the South African government is doing it right, Andy has leverage or ammunition to say, come on, I don't know who the new president is now, but Prime Minister, so I'll call it Margaret Thatcher for now. This is the way we should be doing it. But yeah, sorry, small little joke. Okay. But that's what I see happening.
Right. And Andy, what's your experience from the UK? Is it very much about public-private partnership? Does the PSA have a voice in engagements?
Yeah, it's Thatcher without a hairdresser, basically. So we do. I mean, when this all started becoming a problem, we were called to a roundtable meeting with the Secretary of State for Culture. And I drove up to London and got to London, looked at my email, and they said the meeting's off. And it was the day that we went into lockdown, so they couldn't have any meetings because they were just about to tell the world to not have any more meetings. So we all met the next day on the phone, and we've been in conversation with the culture minister every week for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and that's a roundtable discussion with the whole of the creative sector, into which we feed evidence we've gathered on the impact of business measures. And I think over the first 3 weeks, 80% of the conversation was about help that businesses needed. Now the packages have started to be delivered and things are settling. 80% of the conversation is about how we come back from this as a sector. And that's really important, because we were the first to the edge of the cliff, and we'll be last away from the edge of the cliff. And if measures are pulled away too quickly, we'll just get pushed over the edge of the cliff, and all we'll have is a sector that had a delay to its demise. So we've really got to start talking about the financial packages, but also, and the inspiration for this came from the Event Safety Alliance and the board meeting, and Steve Edelman saying we need to take ownership of the return of our sector. We yes. really do, with this redefinition and a good plan, because people don't know how to plan our comeback. On the call that we had with the minister yesterday, there was a guy from the art auction association. You know, they're auctioneers, and they take very expensive pieces of art and sell them. And they've got a plan for comeback, which involves galleries allowing people to go and view products in a very managed environment, pre-booked, and then the auction takes place online. It's really simple if you're running auctions. You know, you're not going to go down the auction house, sit next to somebody and you paddle when you want to buy something. You just got to engage with the online process. But that's a simple route for a return for part of the cultural sector, the sale of art. So we've got to look at that and whether it is and expecting people to take their own hand sanitizer. That in itself will be an issue, because I'll just be able to turn up with a bottle that says hand sanitizer on it, and unless you can actually test the strength of the amount of alcohol that's in it, you're not going to get away with it. So masks, you can see it's a mask. Gowns, you can see it's a gown, but hand sanitizer, you're going to have to buy it and hand it out yourself. So that's or just charge for it. I don't know.
Yes.
So that's really where we've been going. So that there is really positive political engagement, and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport are taking the information, they're asking us for information, they're coaching us in how to get the information so they can deliver packages to the Treasury and say, this is the cultural industry and this is the financial stimulus it's going to need to come back. So, you know, we're all managing the comeback safely to get back into the venues, but the financial support we need, and the fact that if an economy is going to recover, let's not forget that everybody here and everybody around the world needs to remind their government that cultural activity is a great deliverer of economic impact, because people go to things and they spend on hotels and cabs and restaurants and all the kind of stuff that goes around it. And that's not just entertainment events, that's business events. You know, in the UK, half of all tourism spend is through business travel.
Yes.
And it's far fewer people spending far more money.
I had that exact conversation with the South African Association for the Conference Industry this morning, talking about the economic footprint of our industry sector and how difficult it is to put a value to it. I'm going to go to some of the online questions. First, a comment from Andre Dutoy, one of our members who's based in Dubai. We are here in the Middle East. We have also adopted our internal and external health and safety strategy to make policies, like Sharif said, being proactive rather than reactive. And then a question here from Wayne Brudrake, who says event organisers have not adhered to certain rules and regulations in the past. It is not enforced in some areas. How is it going to change going forward? The price for one is going to change. How do we ensure or enforce that there is a set standard? So who wants to jump in with an answer to that question? Very obvious.
I'm going to go at that one. Having been a safety consultant to the event business for over 20 years and worked globally, you know, let's be honest, there isn't a set standard. There isn't a set standard internationally, and there isn't a set standard within many territories. But having said that, that doesn't mean we shouldn't aspire to do the right thing. And I think that's where we should be at. So I can ferociously agree with Sharif and Zona and the others who've spoken. You know, we do need to come up with this collective set of practical measures, and whether the TPSA or the ESA or whoever is collating that, it doesn't really matter who does it as long as they are practical and sensible. But those measures are still waiting for some critical scientific input. So, for example, I've been on the call and trying to think of how terrible the nightmare is for Gearhouse and for other kind of providers. We don't know how long the virus lives on a surface. So does that mean that before Gearhouse send out a piece of trust, it has to be sterilized? Or is that completely stupid because the virus don't live on truss? We don't have to worry about that.
Yes.
How long does the virus live on a barricade in front of the stage? We don't know. So coming up with elaborate and expensive protocols to every 20 seconds, you know, sluice down the front of the stage or whatever, or someone rush along with a hand wipe. We need to base our plan on science, and it needs to be exactly as Sharif has said, practical and targeted, so that there isn't a colossal fiscal burden either on the technical providers or the crewing companies or the promoter. But we have to do our bit. We have to do what is sufficient and what is reasonable, just like we've done with hard hats, harnesses, steel-toed cap boots, giving people days off, feeding people, giving them a bathroom, giving them a toilet, those kind of things. We need to now move our discourse into this health realm as well. And it can't be too much, otherwise it's too much. It needs to be practical, sensible. And I think that's the way forward. And we as trade associations and practitioners around the world need to pool our knowledge, because there's nothing to be gained by anyone keeping a secret to themselves. This is a perfect opportunity for us to show that we have nothing to hide and everything to gain by talking openly with each other. And you may have come up with a great way of using UV lights to sanitize people as they walk in the gig. Fantastic. Tell us about it. We'll all do it and we'll benefit.
Now, Jim, I remember you and I were chatting the other day, and you said to me that the Event Safety Alliance was working on some kind of document, and the idea was that you would share it with associations like the PSA and SACIA or our TPSA Council, so that we could have a kind of a global standard. What's the current status of that document, and when do we expect it to be available?
Thanks, Kevin. It's currently under development in a manageable working group size. And I believe our target for a larger working group is the next week, at which point I think that is to you, Kevin, and your constituents there, and to Tim and Andy and the rest, and a large, wide open review process, I think, is currently slated for May 11th, but it is fast and ferocious on an all volunteer basis moving forward. Happy to have everyone get involved now. I can share the link with you.
Okay, I have a couple of people that have raised their hands and want to say something. So I'm going to call in on them now. I just wanted to acknowledge that here we are. Errol, Jackie and Leanne have all raised their hands, so I'm going to come introduce you shortly. But I also have 20 questions that people have posted online. So here's another one. We like the concept of organized events. How will this impact the venue? How much of this will fall onto how much of this cost will fall onto the venue's shoulder? I don't know if anybody wants to pick that one up. My point is that the cost is probably not one of the key issues for us to focus on right now. Anybody else have an opinion? Keep me down in flames by all means. Zona, whose cost? Andy, you want to pick it up?
I can say one thing: production ain't paying.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Production
Well,
ain't paying.
what I'm thinking currently is our SACIA Act in South Africa say that our venues should have a venue risk categorization as well. And I know that there is very few venues in South Africa that actually do have that in place. So I would suggest that part of that venue risk categorization is then the health aspect on the coronavirus, and that we should start putting pressure on the venues to get their venue risk categorization sorted, because then it will mean that they are safe venues that we can use going forward, that they have all the measures in place. I don't know. That's just something that I think is important.
Yeah, I think if I can come in there with Phil, if you can back me up here, I think it speaks to, yeah, production's not going to pay for it, technical's certainly not going to pay for it, but we all need to hold hands. We need to find a way forward in making it work, like Zona is saying, even from the SACIA Act. And I'm pretty sure people like Andre, people that don't adhere, I'm sure Phil will speak to them very, very nicely to make sure they comply. But I think we need to find solutions here now. And it's people, especially like Phil and Mike, that are on the ground, and Renthia, that speak from a safety aspect, speak from a security aspect. We need to put this paper and document together so that event houses, production houses, technical houses, municipalities, and people applying for it, generally for an event permit, listen to us now so that it can be done right on this new clean slate. It sounds harsh what I'm saying, but if we want to do this right moving forward and make sure everybody's safe and happy, I know Phil is engaging with somebody that does these sanitization booths that you walk in through before you get into a venue, which I think is a good idea. You know, kills two birds with one stone. You can have a thermometer checking out temperatures and facial recognition and all of those things. So I actually put this down to Phil to come up with a solution and guide us with his extreme wisdom and gray hair.
Kevin, can I just ask a question? So please bear with me. The international speakers, Andy, Jim, and Tim, and I'm going to sort of pass on to Sharif. How close has the international guys moved through the departments close to the health department? Because the moment our standards, the numbers, the science is driven by the health department, health ministry, okay? So if there's a solution that needs to be signed off, it needs to be through the health department, then back through the other departments. Andy, how have you guys, are the representatives of the health department in your discussions, how have you guys overcome that?
Is that a question for Andy?
Yeah, so
I can jump in there that for every permitted event in the UK, you need a license, you need a permit, and that permit requires you to consider 4 key objectives, the principal one of which is the protection of public safety. So there is already a legal mechanism whereby the organizer of an event or someone who is in charge of a premises that's carrying out regulated activity needs to be able to demonstrate they're protecting public safety to a reasonable degree. I'm absolutely certain that there's not going to be a new law, but there will certainly be a requirement and scrutiny of what are we doing to keep people safe. But going back to the point made previously, you know, that burden can't simply fall on either the venue operator or the lighting company or the trucking company or the guys doing busing or the people who are sanitizing follow spot chairs. You know, we're all in this together and we should only be required to do what is reasonable. But let's face it, we've had these burdens before, and the conversation is very similar to what happened after 9/11 and after the Bataclan Club and all the stuff in Paris and other terrorist attacks we've had, where organizers find themselves responsible for counter-terrorism measures that previously had just been the preserve of special forces and secret arms of the government. But it hasn't put us out of business. We need to be sensible, we need to be proportionate, and if we do this right, then as someone else on the call has said, you know, we're able to offer reassurance to our customers and to our working partners who are more likely to come to our show because we can demonstrate we've done the right thing. So I again see health and safety here as a positive sales tool rather than simply considering it as being a negative on the bottom line of our budget sheet. Sure, it's going to cost us money, but heck, you know, everyone staying at home for the entire globe is costing way more money, and ultimately we're going to have to spend that ourselves in our taxes in the decades to come. But I think we need to do our bit. But we're in the same boat as the guy. Sorry, no metaphor meant there. The same problem occurs for public transportation. You know, if I'm running a festival site and I've got 100,000 patrons coming to my show, I've got to do something to protect them. But if 50,000 of those guys are going through the railroad station or are going to crowd onto public transportation to get to me, I want to know that the transport folks are doing their bit as well. It's not just on us because they gather at our event sites. It needs to be a whole chain of protection all the way back to that person's front door. So yeah, we shouldn't bear this burden disproportionately, and it needs to be applied even-handedly, you know, across the whole physical and kind of clinical journey of the patron from their home place to our show and back again.
Thank you. Sorry, I just want to leap in here. There are a number of people, as said earlier, that have put their hands up to ask a question. Errol, I've been trying to unmute you, but I think you're muted your end. So if you want to ask a question, you need to unmute your microphone. And I'm going to invite some of the other people that have raised their hands to ask a question. So Alistair, I've just sent you an invitation to unmute.
There you go.
Okay, Alistair, would you like to ask your question?
First, thanks guys, ladies and gents, for all your input. I represent the decor industry, so we're one of the larger decor companies in the country, and there doesn't seem to be much, or many of these sort of groups that you guys have that actually have decor companies that are part of it. You know, when you go to a big event, our decor basically is everywhere. The draping for the AV guys, the tables, the chairs, the glasses, you name it, we bring it in. So the other part of that we're also experiencing is that our return on investment of our stock relevance to keeping up with the trends is a problem. So if we are going to be adding on all these extra costs that you guys are mentioning to make these events happen, our clients, you know, are struggling to pay what they're paying currently. So I think that could be a bit of a problem moving forward.
So, Alistair, I'm going to mute you again. My response to that is that the solution that we need to find is one that is not specific to events technical production. It's all stakeholders within the events industry. So whether you're an event organizer, whether you're a venue owner, whether you're a technology supplier, whether you're a freelancer, all of us are going to have to work together to find a solution to this. You know, there is just no way that any one of us can drive it independently.
I think it's also incumbent on show designers and show planners when we come back out of this to go for inventory that exists in the vendors' houses and not needing, you know, to resist the urge to go get the latest technology that's been developed that nobody has an inventory. And that, you know, let's work together with the vendors to use the stuff they already have that's collecting dust currently.
Yep. Yes. Okay, Errol, did you mute your microphone? No? Okay. So I'm going to go, Chantel, you had a question. Do you want to ask it live? No. Okay, so the next online question here was, knowing our concert goers, writes Belinda Saville, they will swap their hand sanitizer for alcohol. So I think that concert goers will have to take some responsibility. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. I think it's probably very likely that that's exactly what they'll do. Yeah, let's move on to the next question. Oh, that's a good one. Well done. Marielle Detoy, if you set up registration at any event going forward and collect the data, speaking from a venue's perspective, does this go against the POPI Act? So POPI is the Protection of Personal Information Act. And how do you handle guests who refuse to complete the registration process? I don't know if anyone's going to disagree with me, but I think going forward, if they don't complete the registration process, they don't walk through the door. Anyone disagree there? Yeah. No. Like caterers and technical decor, etc. This is a question from Inga Crow. All of these companies have certificates of compliance. What will a venue and supplier present to be compliant to, as this will affect decisions for event agencies? Shouldn't venues be responsible for having sanitizers at the entrance, etc., etc., etc.? This is a question from Progeny Pather, who is the current chair of the African Association for Exhibition Organisers. And absolutely. So, Sharif, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, it's going to be a hand-in-glove scenario. You know, it's going to come down to the production house. It's going to come down to the venue of finding that equilibrium and making it work with, like Jim and Tim said, with in-house stuff that they own, and security what they bring in, and safety officers what they bring in. I think it is going to have to, it's a change. I say again, it's a new world order. We're going to have to find the right playing field for everybody to take some form of responsibility for human life. The registration process, the sanitation process. And yes, I mean, we all chuckled, but Belinda's 100% right. And human nature is that way inclined. If I can put something else in there and come through because I want to be brave, and especially the youngsters of today, it's most, they say in Afrikaans, bors uit, you know, type of scenario. We have to be the leaders of example and of maturity in what we do going forward. And it comes back to, again, whether you're an event, whether you're an exhibition, whether you're a restaurateur, we all have to be speaking the same rhetoric, the same language in making sure that event safety, whether it's a one-man band in a small little restaurant or whether it's Maroon 5 on a stage at the Dome or O2, we're all speaking the same language as far as health and safety is concerned.
Yep. So Wade Bromfield writes, I think the point on entrants or patrons to bring their hand sanitizers is not realistic in South Africa. I'm not going to bother doing that one. I think we've discussed it. David Leverington, we talk a lot about mass gatherings as opposed to organized events, but what about sporting events? So does anybody, what's the situation with sporting events? Yep, Andy and Phil.
Football's got a lot more money than we have. You know, I think Manchester United Football Club is worth about the same as the live music industry in the UK. So they will probably manage their return quicker than we do. They've got the advantage of being able to televise games without a crowd because their money comes from television. Our money comes from the crowd.
Yes.
So we can follow them if they get crowds back in, but I guess that we'll probably be managing crowds getting back into events before they are. But if not, we can follow their lobby.
Yes. And Phil, you wanted to pick up on that one?
Yeah. Okay, just to think of SACIA at the moment, moving the international tours later, we've hoped, and the dates have been set for October. Our June tests have moved on, hoping that, you know, there will be some normality. Obviously, they're looking at us to see if there's a test against Scotland, how will access control work? What will our responsibilities be? Will it be feasible? Do we all wait for the British Airlines tour in July next year? So it's still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions around government, you know, pulling the plug or saying how we have to do it. So definitely we've moved everything on.
So
Kevan,
sorry, who's that?
Yeah, Kevan, it's Mike Lord, yeah.
Yes, go.
Yeah, so I think Phil touched on an important point. The problem that we have is that we can't work out when our next set of events are, whether an event, a small gathering, or whatever it is, for some time. And the problem is that government in South Africa is going to dictate to us like it normally does what needs to happen. You know, prior to 2010, prior to the World Cup, we didn't have a set of event safety laws in our country, and we inherited event safety laws. We look at the isolation issues that they put down, you know, with regards to the National Disaster Act: no alcohol, no cigarettes. If the Minister of Police, if our government's going to dictate to our industry as a whole how we are going to do this, we are always going to be on the back foot. So, you know, we have to be lobbying all the departments, unfortunately, in lobbying what it is that we can do, because if we get told what to do, I can tell you now, to implement that will be really difficult. So we have to set up the right people, the right platforms to be engaging on multiple levels, unfortunately, in South Africa, to be able to determine what these new protocols are for events.
Yes, absolutely.
Kev, my point of earlier, just a question to the international panelists of how they overcame and how do they get closer to the Department of Health? Because Mike is correct. If health says no, it ain't going to happen. How do we take the solution, get a green stamp and say this is acceptable, then we can start doing a plan. We're doing all these plans, but it might not be acceptable. So, you know, the question is, did the international guys, have they moved closer to the decision makers? Because we're a bit distant at the moment.
Yes. Okay, I'm not going to take any more questions. We've got 90 seconds left before our 1 hour limit. Sharif, can I ask you to wrap up in the last 90 seconds?
I think the wrap up is exactly what Mike is saying, is exactly what everyone is saying, that if we can all stick together and have the same documentation, especially if Department of Health in the UK is speaking to the PSA, if the Department of Health is speaking to Esther in the USA, we will then have a leg to stand on, dictating the other way round to the Department of Health here. It's a matter of positive, being unified, and all speaking the same language globally. We have a perfect opportunity here to make sure we're all speaking the same language, whether you're coming to do a gig in Johannesburg or whether you're coming to do a gig in London. That's what I think that we should be doing collectively moving forward.
Okay.
Could I just add to those wise words from Sharif? That I think that if there is a silver lining to this terribly dark cloud of the virus, it's that people now give a damn whether crew get to wash their hands. People now give a damn about the general health, safety, and well-being of people working on the shows and people coming to the shows. And I think that must be a good thing, and we should maximize that positivity.
Okay. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us for this webinar. We're smack on our 60-minute limit. I'm going to we have recorded this webinar. We're going to be posting it onto our various social media platforms. So thank you very much. And yeah, I appreciate everybody's input.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, you too.